The deafening crack of gunfire echoed through the dusty streets of Willow Creek as Nora Wallace dove behind an overturned wagon, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was 1875, and this sleepy frontier town in Wyoming Territory had just erupted into chaos. Not the welcome she'd expected when she'd arrived to take ownership of her late uncle's general store. "Get down." A deep voice commanded as a stranger's body suddenly covered hers, shielding her from flying splinters as another bullet struck the wagon. Nora's breath caught in her throat as she found herself staring into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-weathered face beneath a worn leather hat. The man pressed a finger to his lips, signaling silence as the gunfire continued down the street. "Bank robbery," he whispered, his voice low and gravelly. "Stay here until it's over." Before Nora could respond, he was gone, moving with surprising agility for such a tall man, his duster billowing behind him as he disappeared around the corner. 5 minutes later, the shooting stopped. Cautiously, Nora peered around the wagon to see a crowd gathering outside the bank. 2 bodies lay in the street outlaws, judging by their rough appearance. The sheriff and his deputy were securing the scene while townspeople emerged from hiding to gawk and gossip. But the blue-eyed stranger was nowhere to be seen. "Miss Wallace," Mrs. Perkins, the postmistress, hurried over. "Are you hurt? What a terrible welcome to our town." "I'm fine," Nora assured her, brushing dust from her skirts. "Who were those men?" "Holly's gang," Mrs. Perkins tusked. "Been terrorizing this region for months. Thank the Lord the sheriff was ready for them." Nora nodded absently, her eyes searching the crowd. "There was a man who helped me, tall, blue eyes, brown leather hat." Mrs. Perkins followed her gaze. "Sounds like Ethan Xavier, but he rarely comes to town except to deliver mail to the remote homesteads. Keeps to himself mostly, has a small ranch about 5 miles east." Nora committed the name to memory, determined to thank the man who'd likely saved her life. But setting up the store consumed her next few days. Her uncle Jacob had left her the establishment in his will, much to the surprise of everyone in town, including Nora herself. She'd only met her mother's brother twice as a child before he'd headed west seeking fortune. Now, at 23, with both parents gone and prospects limited in Boston, Nora had decided to accept the unexpected inheritance. The store needed substantial work. Dust covered everything, shelves sagged, and inventory was depleted. Nora slept on a small cot in the back room while making the upstairs apartment habitable. Each morning, she rose before dawn to clean and organize before opening for the day's business. On her 4th morning in Willow Creek, Nora discovered a sealed envelope that had been slipped under the store's front door. Her name was written on it in a bold, masculine hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Miss Wallace, I trust you're recovering from your alarming welcome to Willow Creek. The store looks better already with your touch. If you need assistance with the heavy work, Jenkins at the livery stable can recommend reliable help. EX." Nora stared at the note, rereading it several times. Her mysterious rescuer had been watching her, yet hadn't introduced himself. She stepped outside, scanning the quiet street, but saw no sign of Ethan Xavier. Following his advice, Nora visited Jenkins that afternoon and hired 2 young men to repair shelves and move heavy furniture. By week's end, Wallace General Goods was properly open for business, and Nora had established a routine. She was surprised by how quickly the townsfolk accepted her, though she sensed many were simply curious about the Eastern lady running Jacob Wallace's store. A week after finding the first note, another appeared in the same spot. "Miss Wallace, your store is becoming the talk of the town. Mrs. Perkins mentioned you're seeking suppliers for fabric and notions. Thompson's in Cheyenne is reliable but expensive. Try writing to Abernathy's in Denver instead. Their catalog is in the bottom drawer of your uncle's desk, if he kept it where he always did." EX. Nora immediately checked the desk and found the catalog exactly where Ethan had suggested. She ordered a variety of fabrics that same day, wondering all the while how this stranger knew so much about her uncle's business. 2 more weeks passed. The store flourished as Nora's Eastern sensibilities brought order and selection that appealed to the town's residents. She began to feel at home in Willow Creek, making acquaintances if not yet true friends. Each morning she looked for another letter, but none appeared, until one crisp autumn morning when she found an envelope containing a pressed wildflower and a brief note. These grow on the ridge east of town. The view at sunrise is worth the early ride. EX. Nora examined the delicate purple blossom, touched by the gesture. Why didn't this man simply come speak with her in person? His continued absence and mysterious communications both frustrated and intrigued her. That evening, Sheriff Mills stopped by the store as she was closing. "Miss Wallace, settling in well, I hope." "Very well, thank you," Nora replied, securing the cash drawer. "Good to hear. Say, I noticed you asking around town about Ethan Xavier." Nora felt her cheeks warm. "He helped me during the robbery. I only wish to thank him properly." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Xavier's a good man, but he keeps to himself. Came here about 3 years back, bought old Peterson's place, raises horses, does some work for the mail service, fought in the war union side." "You know him well?" Nora asked, trying to sound casual. "Not particularly, few do." The sheriff adjusted his hat. "Just thought I'd mention he lost his wife and daughter to typhoid before coming west. Hit him hard, from what I gather. Folks say that's why he doesn't socialize much." Nora's heart constricted at this revelation. "Thank you for telling me." After the sheriff left, Nora found herself standing at her window, looking eastward where Ethan Xavier's ranch apparently lay. A widower who chose solitude over society, yet he'd gone out of his way to help her, a stranger. The contradiction fascinated her. The next morning, another letter waited. "Miss Wallace, I noticed your store lacks proper shutters for winter storms. Wyoming winters are harsher than Boston's. If you're agreeable, I'll bring materials and tools this Sunday when the store is closed. EX." This time, Nora was determined to meet him. She wrote a quick response. "Mr. Xavier, your assistance would be most welcome. I'll provide lunch as thanks for your help and for saving my life during the robbery. Sunday at 10 o'clock, NW." She asked Jenkins at the livery to deliver her note, but the following day he returned it unopened. "Couldn't find him, Miss Wallace. His ranch hand said he'd ridden out to the northern pastures and wouldn't be back for days." Frustrated, Nora decided to take matters into her own hands. Early Saturday morning, she rented a gentle mare from Jenkins and, following his careful directions, set out for Ethan Xavier's ranch. The ride was longer than she'd anticipated. The terrain grew increasingly rugged as she left town behind, magnificent vistas opening before her as she climbed into rolling hills covered with autumn golden grass. After nearly 2 hours, she crested a rise and saw a modest ranch spread out in the valley below a small cabin with smoke rising from its chimney. A barn, corrals holding several fine-looking horses, and fenced pastures stretching into the distance. As she approached, a dog began barking and a wiry older man emerged from the barn. "Can I help you, madam?" he called, eyeing her with suspicion. "I'm looking for Mr. Xavier," Nora replied, suddenly uncertain about the wisdom of her impulsive journey. "He ain't here," the man said flatly. "I'm Gil Peterson, ranch hand. Who's asking?" "Nora Wallace from the general store in town. Mr. Xavier has been kind enough to offer advice about my business. I wanted to thank him personally." Gil's weathered face softened slightly. "Ah, you're Jacob's niece. He spoke of you." "You knew my uncle? Everyone round these parts knew Jacob. Good man." Gil scratched his beard. "Mr. Xavier won't be back till late tonight. He's delivering mail to the northern settlements." Nora's disappointment must have shown on her face because Gil added, "You can leave a message if you like." "Thank you, but I'll speak with him another time." Nora gathered her reins. "Could you tell me, does Mr. Xavier deliver all the mail in this region, most of it to the outlying areas?" "Post office pays him as a contractor. He knows these hills better than anyone, can get through in all weather." Pride colored Gil's voice. "Best horseman I've seen in 40 years out west." Nora thanked him and began the long ride back to town, contemplating this new information. Ethan Xavier wasn't just a reclusive rancher, he was the mail carrier for the region, which explained how her mysterious letters appeared so regularly. Sunday morning dawned clear and cool. Nora rose early, swept the store, and baked fresh bread and apple pie. By 9:30, she changed into a simple blue dress and waited anxiously for her visitor. 10 o'clock came and went with no sign of Ethan Xavier. By 11, Nora began to think he wouldn't appear. Just as disappointment settled heavily in her chest, she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. From her window, she watched a tall figure in a familiar leather hat pull a loaded wagon to a halt outside her store. Nora smoothed her skirts and opened the door before he could knock. "Mr. Xavier," she said, finding herself suddenly breathless. He removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair touched with silver at the temples. Those remarkable blue eyes studied her with a wariness that contrasted with the gentle curve of his lips. "Miss Wallace," he said, his deep voice even more appealing than she remembered. "I've brought lumber and tools for your shutters. Please come in." Nora stepped aside. "I've prepared lunch to thank you." A flicker of hesitation crossed his face. "That wasn't necessary. I insist." She met his gaze directly. "It's the least I can do after all your helpful letters." Something changed in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or embarrassment at being confronted so directly about his notes. For a moment, Nora thought he might turn and leave. Instead, he nodded once and followed her inside. Ethan Xavier moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to physical labor. Nora estimated him to be in his mid-30s, his lean frame honed by hard work. His clothes were plain but well-maintained: a blue cotton shirt, dark trousers, sturdy boots. Up close, she noticed the faint scar that ran along his left jawline. They ate at the small table in her back room: fresh bread, cheese, cold ham, and apple pie. At first, conversation was stilted. Ethan answered her questions politely but offered little beyond what was asked. "How did you know my uncle?" Nora finally inquired. Ethan set down his fork. "Jacob helped me when I first arrived. He paused, searching for words, not in a good state. He offered me work, a place to stay until I could purchase my ranch." "The sheriff mentioned you lost your family," Nora said softly. "I'm very sorry." Ethan's expression tightened. "Sheriff Mills talks too much." He meant well. "I lost both my parents within a year, my father to heart failure, my mother to grief shortly after." "I understand something of loss, though not the same as yours." His eyes met hers, a shared understanding passing between them. "Jacob spoke of you often. He was proud of his niece in Boston who taught at the girls' school." "I wish I'd known him better," Nora admitted. "His letters were infrequent but always entertaining. I never expected to inherit his store." "He wanted you to have a fresh start." Ethan pushed his empty plate away. "He worried about you being alone in the city." "How do you know that?" A hint of color touched Ethan's cheeks. "We talked. When I carried mail to remote homesteads, I'd often stay at his place overnight before returning. Jacob liked conversation with his whiskey." Nora smiled, picturing her gruff uncle sharing stories with this quiet man. "And now you bring me letters instead." Ethan stood abruptly. "I should start on those shutters." For the rest of the afternoon, Ethan worked on crafting sturdy wooden shutters for the store's windows. Nora helped where she could, holding boards steady and passing tools. As they worked, the initial awkwardness between them gradually eased. Ethan explained the particular challenges of Wyoming winters, the fierce storms that could strand travelers and isolate towns for days. "These shutters might seem excessive now," he said, as he fitted hinges to a particularly large panel, "but come January, you'll be grateful for them." By late afternoon, half the windows had new shutters. Ethan secured his tools in the wagon and put on his hat. "I'll return next Sunday to finish the rest," he said, "unless that's inconvenient." "It's perfectly convenient," Nora replied. "I'll expect you at 10 again." He nodded, hesitated as if wanting to say more, then simply tipped his hat and departed. The following morning, another letter waited beneath her door. "Miss Wallace, thank you for your hospitality yesterday. Your apple pie rivals Mrs. Holbrook's, which has won the county fair 3 years running. I've enclosed information about winterizing the store's plumbing to prevent frozen pipes. EX." Nora smiled at the note, especially the compliment about her baking. The detailed instructions about the plumbing were clearly written from experience. She followed them carefully that very day. For the next week, a letter appeared each morning, sometimes containing practical advice about the store or the coming winter, occasionally including observations about the town or its residents that helped Nora navigate the social waters of Willow Creek. Each note revealed a little more of Ethan Xavier's thoughtful, observant nature. When Sunday arrived, Nora was ready with fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls. Ethan arrived precisely at 10, and they fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. As he worked on the remaining shutters, Nora asked about his ranch and horses. "I breed quarter horses," he explained, warming to the subject. "Started with 2 mares and a stallion. Now I have 15, including this year's foals." "Do you sell them locally?" "Some. The Army purchased 6 last spring. They're strong, sure-footed animals, ideal for this terrain." Pride colored his voice. The mail route pays steady, but the horses are my real work. I'd like to see them sometime, Nora said. Ethan paused, hammer in midair. You would? Yes. I visited your ranch last Saturday, but you were away. The hammer lowered slowly. You rode all that way alone. I'm a capable rider, Mr. Xavier. It's not your ability I question, but your safety. These hills harbor dangers, steep ravines, wild animals, occasionally desperate men. Like the Hollies gang, Nora asked, among others. His brow furrowed. Next time, please ask me to escort you. Will there be a next time? Nora challenged, holding his gaze. Ethan returned to his work, driving a nail with perhaps more force than necessary. If you wish to see the horses, I could bring you next Saturday. We'd return before dark. I would like that very much. They completed the shutters by late afternoon. As Ethan was preparing to leave, Nora handed him a small package. What's this? He asked. Apple pie for your journey home. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Thank you, Miss Wallace. Nora, she corrected. Please call me Nora, he nodded. Nora, the way he said her name sent an unexpected warmth through her. Until Saturday, then. The week passed with a letter each morning, some brief, others more detailed. Nora found herself eagerly anticipating them, rushing downstairs at dawn to retrieve the day's message. Each note offered another glimpse into Ethan's character and mind. Friday's letter was different. Nora, I'll arrive at 8 tomorrow morning. The ride to my ranch takes nearly 2 hours. Dress warmly, and practically the weather may turn quickly this time of year. I look forward to showing you the horses. Ethan, it was the first time he'd signed with just his first name, a small detail that made Nora smile. Saturday dawned clear but cool. Nora dressed in her most practical riding outfit, a divided skirt that allowed her to ride astride rather than side saddle, a warm jacket, and sturdy boots. She'd barely finished breakfast when she heard hoofbeats outside. Ethan waited astride a magnificent black gelding, leading a gentle-looking bay mare. He dismounted smoothly and removed his hat as Nora approached. Good morning, she greeted him, trying to ignore how her heart quickened at the sight of him. Morning. His eyes took in her practical attire with approval. Ready for a ride. The journey to Ethan's ranch was pleasant. The morning air was crisp, the autumn colors brilliant against the vast blue sky. Ethan proved to be a knowledgeable guide, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the region. He seemed more relaxed away from town, his usual reserve softening as they rode side by side. How did you learn so much about this area in just 3 years? Nora asked as they stopped to rest the horses at a stream. Maps, talking to old-timers, exploring every chance I got. Ethan shrugged. The mail routes take me to the most remote places. I've seen more of this territory than most who have lived here decades. Do you enjoy the solitude? Ethan was quiet for a moment, watching the water flow over stones. I used to need it, he finally said. After Caroline and Alice died, being around people was unbearable. Their grief, their pity. Out here, with just the sky and the land, I could breathe again. Nora's heart ached for him. And now, his blue eyes met hers. Now I find I miss certain conversations. They continued riding, cresting a hill that revealed the valley where Ethan's ranch nestled. From this vantage point, Nora could appreciate the careful planning of the property, the sturdy cabin positioned to catch morning sun but sheltered from prevailing winds, the barn and corrals arranged for efficient work, the pastures sectioned by purpose. It's beautiful, she said sincerely. It's not much compared to Eastern standards, Ethan replied, but it suits me. No, it's perfect, Nora insisted. You've created something wonderful here. A pleased expression crossed Ethan's face before he nudged his horse forward. Come meet my horses, they're the real accomplishment. The next few hours passed quickly as Ethan showed Nora around his ranch. His pride in his horses was evident as he introduced each animal, explaining bloodlines and characteristics. In the corral, a mare and her foal approached the fence, curious about visitors. That's Starlight and her colt, Thunder, Ethan said, producing an apple from his pocket. The mare took it delicately from his palm. Gentlest disposition, but still spirited, she's produced 3 excellent foals. Gil prepared a simple but hearty lunch, eyeing Nora with undisguised curiosity throughout the meal. Afterward, Ethan suggested they ride to the ridge he'd mentioned in his earlier note, the one with wildflowers and a view. The climb was steep in places, but Nora's mare was sure-footed. When they reached the top, Nora gasped at the panorama before her rolling hills stretching to distant mountains, the vastness of the Wyoming landscape revealed in all its rugged glory. "Now I understand why you love it here," she said, dismounting to better appreciate the view. Ethan tied their horses to a small tree and joined her at the edge of the ridge. "It has a way of putting things in perspective. Your wife and daughter, would they have liked it here?" Nora asked gently. Pain flickered across Ethan's face, but he didn't withdraw. "Caroline would have found it too remote, I think. She was a city woman, loved Boston's society and culture, but Alice—" A smile touched his lips. "Alice would have loved the horses. She was fearless, even at 5. You must miss them terribly. Every day." Ethan's voice was low. "But not in the same way as at first. The grief changes. It doesn't disappear, but it softens, becomes something you can carry without being crushed by it." "Yes," Nora agreed, thinking of her own parents. "That's exactly it." They stood in companionable silence, watching an eagle soar on thermal currents. Finally, Ethan spoke again. "Why did you come west, Nora? Truly, you had a respectable position in Boston. This life is harder, especially for a woman alone." Nora considered her answer carefully. "After my parents died, nothing felt right anymore. I was teaching other people's daughters while my own life seemed to be standing still. When Uncle Jacob's letter arrived with the news about the store, it felt like permission to start over. And are you glad you came?" She looked at him directly, increasingly so. Something changed in his expression, a softening, a spark of hope quickly hidden. "We should head back," he said. "I promised to have you home before dark." The ride back to town was quieter, both lost in their own thoughts. As they approached Willow Creek, the sun was setting in a spectacular display of orange and purple. Ethan escorted Nora directly to her store and helped her dismount. "Thank you for today," she said, reluctant for their time together to end. "It was my pleasure." He hesitated, then added, "Would you consider joining me for dinner next Friday? There's a decent restaurant at the hotel." Nora couldn't suppress her smile. "I would like that very much." Ethan nodded, a similar smile playing at his lips. "Good night, Nora. Will there still be letters?" She asked impulsively, his expression turned almost shy. "If you wish." "I do." He tipped his hat and rode away, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the evening quiet. True to his word, a letter appeared the next morning. "Nora, thank you for visiting my humble ranch. The horses are still talking about the lady with kind hands and bright eyes. Winter preparations continue. You should check your store's roof for loose shingles before the first snow. I've enclosed a map of the territory with the safest travel routes marked. Until Friday." Ethan, the detailed map, was obviously hand-drawn with careful notations about terrain and safety. Nora studied it, touched by the effort it represented. The week passed in a pleasant routine. Each morning brought another letter, each one slightly more personal than the last. Ethan shared memories of his travels, observations about the changing season, and occasional glimpses into his thoughts. Nora found herself responding in kind, leaving her own notes for him to find when he came before dawn to deliver his daily message. By Friday, Nora was nervous with anticipation. She closed the store early and spent extra time on her appearance, choosing her finest dress, a deep green wool that complemented her auburn hair. At precisely 7 o'clock, a knock sounded on her door. Ethan stood on her threshold, transformed from the working rancher she'd come to know. He wore a well-cut dark suit, white shirt, and string tie. His hair was neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. In his hands he held a small bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers. "You look beautiful," he said simply, presenting the flowers. "As do you," Nora replied, accepting his offering with a smile. "Handsome, I mean." The Valley Hotel restaurant was Willow Creek's finest dining establishment, not particularly grand by Eastern standards, but they made an effort with tablecloths and decent china. Several patrons glanced their way as they entered, curiosity evident in their expressions. "People are staring," Nora whispered as they were seated. "It's not every day the town recluse escorts the prettiest woman in Willow Creek to dinner," Ethan replied dryly. "I imagine we'll be the subject of considerable gossip by morning. Does that bother you?" He considered the question. "A year ago it would have, now." His eyes met hers. "I find I don't mind as long as you don't." "I don't mind at all." Their dinner was pleasant, the food surprisingly good. Conversation flowed more easily than Nora had expected, ranging from books they'd read to places they'd visited. Ethan proved to be well-educated and thoughtful, with quiet opinions on everything from politics to poetry. How did a Boston literature teacher end up running a general store in Wyoming? He asked as they shared apple cobbler for dessert. How did a Boston banker end up breeding horses and delivering mail? She countered, having learned earlier of his previous profession. He acknowledged her point with a nod. Life rarely follows the path we expect. Would you change yours? If you could go back, pain shadowed his eyes. If I could prevent Caroline and Alice's deaths, yes, but that's impossible, given everything else. No, this is where I'm meant to be. Even in your solitude, his gaze was steady. I'm not feeling particularly solitary at the moment. As they walked back to the store after dinner, Ethan offered his arm. Nora took it, enjoying the solid warmth of him beside her. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the vast Wyoming sky. I never saw stars like this in Boston, Nora remarked, looking upward. One advantage of frontier living, Ethan agreed, though there are many disadvantages. Such as limited society, fewer cultural opportunities, greater dangers, he glanced at her. Are you finding it difficult to adjust? Sometimes, Nora admitted. I miss certain comforts, certain conveniences, but there's a freedom here I never experienced in Boston, a chance to define myself by my own efforts rather than by social expectations. They reached her store, pausing at the door. Ethan turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. Nora, I want to be honest with you. When I began leaving those letters, I had no intention of pursuing anything beyond. Friendship, I suppose. I've been content in my solitude, or at least I convinced myself I was. And now, Nora asked softly, now I find myself thinking of you constantly. Planning what to write in my next letter, looking forward to seeing you again. He took a deep breath. It's been a long time since I've felt this way. It's both welcome and terrifying. Nora's heart beat faster. I understand completely. Do you? His voice was barely audible. Yes. She gathered her courage. Your letters have become the highlight of my days. Our conversations make me feel understood in a way I haven't experienced before. I came west seeking a new beginning, Ethan. I never expected that beginning would include you. He reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and touched her cheek with gentle fingers. I'm still carrying grief, Nora. I probably always will. That's something you should consider. We all carry something, she replied. Grief, regret, fear. The question is whether we carry it alone. Ethan's eyes darkened. He leaned forward and kissed her a tender, questioning kiss that asked rather than demanded. Nora responded with equal tenderness, her hand resting lightly on his chest where she could feel his heartbeat. When they separated, Ethan's expression was one of wonder mixed with uncertainty. I should go, he said reluctantly, but I'll see you tomorrow, perhaps a ride if the weather holds. I'd like that, Nora agreed, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. He squeezed her hand gently. Good night, Nora. Good night, Ethan. The next morning, Nora woke to the sound of rain pounding on the roof. Disappointment washed over her at the realization that their planned ride would be impossible in such weather. Still, she hurried downstairs, hoping for one of Ethan's letters. Instead, she found Ethan himself, dripping wet on her doorstep. You're soaked, she exclaimed, pulling him inside. It started just as I reached town, he explained, removing his dripping hat. I'm sorry about our ride. Don't be ridiculous. Come warm yourself by the stove while I make coffee. Soon they were sitting at her small table, steam rising from their cups. Outside, the rain continued relentlessly, turning Willow Creek's main street into a muddy river. I'd offer to help with the store today, Ethan said, but I doubt you'll have many customers in this weather. Probably not, Nora agreed. Though Mrs. Perkins will brave anything if she thinks there's news to be had, Ethan laughed, the sound warming Nora more than the coffee. And our dinner last night certainly qualifies as news. They spent the morning talking, more at ease with each other than ever before. Ethan told her about his childhood in Massachusetts, his years at Harvard, his career in banking that had felt increasingly hollow until tragedy gave him perspective. Nora shared stories of her strict father, her gentle mother, her years teaching at Miss Porter's school for young ladies. I was engaged once, she confessed, surprising herself with the admission. To a colleague of my father's, a professor of mathematics. Robert was kind, intelligent, stable. What happened? Ethan asked. He wanted a traditional wife, someone to keep his home, bear his children, support his career, all perfectly reasonable desires. Nora stared into her cup. But when I imagined that life stretching before me for decades, I felt suffocated. When I ended our engagement, my parents were devastated. My father never really forgave me. You wanted something more, Ethan observed, or something different, a chance to discover who I might become outside of others' expectations. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. And have you discovered who you might become? Nora considered the question. I'm still discovering, but I know I don't regret my decision either to end my engagement or to come west. By afternoon, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Ethan reluctantly said he needed to return to the ranch to check on his horses after the storm. Will you come to church tomorrow? Nora asked as he prepared to leave. Ethan hesitated. I haven't attended services since arriving in Willow Creek. Pastor Miller is quite good, Nora encouraged. And afterward, we could have lunch here. Attending church together is a statement in a small town, Ethan warned. People will assume. Let them assume, Nora said boldly. Unless you'd rather not be associated with the Eastern shopkeeper, his expression softened. That's hardly my concern. He took her hand. Very well, I'll attend services tomorrow, for you. True to his word, Ethan appeared at Nora's door Sunday morning, dressed in his good suit. Together they walked to the small white church at the end of Main Street, aware of curious glances from other churchgoers. Pastor Miller's sermon focused on renewal and second chances, a message that seemed particularly fitting. Throughout the service, Nora was acutely conscious of Ethan beside her, his deep voice joining the hymns, his shoulder occasionally brushing hers. After church, several townspeople approached to greet them. Mrs. Perkins was particularly effusive, her eyes bright with curiosity. Mr. Xavier, what a delightful surprise to see you in church, and escorting our dear Miss Wallace, no less. Miss Wallace has been kind enough to tolerate my company, Ethan replied politely. How wonderful, Mrs. Perkins gushed. You know, we're having a harvest social next Saturday at the schoolhouse. The whole town attends. You both simply must come. Before either could respond, Sheriff Mills joined them. Xavier, good to see you. Say, could I have a word? There's been reports of riders near the Collins place might be Holly's gang remnants. Ethan excused himself to speak with the sheriff while Mrs. Perkins turned her full attention to Nora. My dear, he's quite handsome, isn't he? A bit older, of course, but established, and that ranch of his is said to be quite profitable. She lowered her voice. There were several young ladies who tried to catch his eye when he first arrived, but he showed no interest whatsoever. You must have special qualities indeed. Nora maintained her composure with effort. Mr. Xavier and I are friends, Mrs. Perkins. We enjoy each other's company. Of course, dear, the postmistress replied with a knowing smile. Just friends, how lovely. When Ethan returned, his expression was serious. I need to speak with some of the northern ranchers about these reports. I'll escort you home first. They walked back to the store in thoughtful silence. At her door, Ethan took both her hands in his. I'll need to ride out this afternoon, he explained. The Hollies gang has been a menace to isolated homesteads. If they're regrouping after the bank robbery, people need to be warned. Will you be in danger? Nora couldn't keep the worry from her voice. I'll be careful, he promised. And I'll return as soon as I can. He hesitated, then added, would you consider attending the harvest social with me on Saturday? Nora smiled. I'd be delighted. He kissed her cheek, his lips lingering perhaps longer than strictly proper. I'll write, he promised before departing. True to his word, letters continued to appear each morning, even though Ethan himself was away for several days. Each note detailed his progress visiting outlying ranches, along with personal observations and questions about her day. On Thursday, his letter brought welcome news. Nora, I'll return tomorrow. The reports were exaggerated, just some cowboys passing through, not the Hollies gang. Still, the homesteaders are more alert now, which is never a bad thing. I've missed our conversations. I find myself composing letters to you in my head throughout the day, until tomorrow. Ethan, Nora reread the letter several times, finding new meaning in each careful phrase. She was falling in love with Ethan. Xavier had perhaps already fallen, and the realization was both exhilarating and frightening. Friday brought Ethan back to Willow Creek. He appeared at the store in the late afternoon, trail dust still clinging to his clothes but a bright smile lighting his face when he saw her. Welcome back, Nora said, stepping into his embrace without hesitation. It's good to be back, he murmured against her hair. They spent the evening planning for the harvest social. Nora found herself looking forward to the event with an excitement she hadn't felt in years. The prospect of attending as Ethan's acknowledged companion made the simple country gathering seem momentous. Saturday night arrived clear and cool. Ethan collected Nora in his wagon, his appreciative gaze warming her as she appeared in her best dress, a rich burgundy with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. He himself was handsome in his dark suit, his hair neatly combed, his blue eyes bright with anticipation. The schoolhouse had been transformed with autumn decorations, dried corn stalks, pumpkins, colorful leaves arranged artfully around the room. Nearly everyone in Willow Creek and the surrounding area had turned out for the event. A small group of musicians played lively tunes while children darted between groups of chatting adults. Miss Wallace, Mr. Xavier, Mrs. Perkins hurried over as soon as they entered. How wonderful to see you both. Come, let me introduce you to some folks you might not have met yet. For the next hour, they circulated among various groups. Nora was surprised by how easily Ethan conversed with people he'd apparently avoided for years. When she mentioned this during a quiet moment, he smiled ruefully. I'm making an effort, he admitted. For you, just for me, partly. He considered his next words carefully, and partly for myself. I've hidden away too long. When the musicians struck up a waltz, Ethan turned to her with a slight bow. May I have this dance, Miss Wallace? You may, Mr. Xavier, she replied, placing her hand in his. Ethan proved to be an excellent dancer, guiding her smoothly around the floor. Nora was acutely conscious of his hand at her waist, the subtle scent of his shaving soap, the warmth in his eyes as he gazed down at her. People are watching us, she whispered. Let them, he replied. I'm dancing with the most beautiful woman in Wyoming territory. I want everyone to see. The evening continued with more dancing, delicious homemade food, and lively conversation. Nora found herself truly enjoying the simple country gathering, appreciating the genuine warmth of frontier hospitality. By the time they left, she felt more a part of Willow Creek than ever before. The night air was crisp as Ethan drove her home, stars brilliant overhead. They traveled in comfortable silence for a while, both processing the evening's events. Thank you for accompanying me tonight, Ethan finally said. I haven't enjoyed myself so much in years. Neither have I, Nora admitted. He glanced at her, even compared to Boston society. Especially compared to that, she smiled. This felt real in a way those gatherings never did, no one pretending to be something they're not. They reached the store, and Ethan helped her down from the wagon. Instead of saying goodnight at the door as usual, Nora invited him inside for coffee. In the warm light of her lamp, they sat close together on her small sofa. Ethan took her hand, his expression serious. Nora, I need to tell you something. Her heart skipped. Yes, when I lost Caroline and Alice, I thought I'd never feel happiness again. I came west to escape the memories, to find a place where every street corner, every face didn't remind me of what I'd lost. He squeezed her hand gently. I never expected to find someone who would make me want to build a new life. Ethan, please let me finish. I know we've only known each other a short time. I know there are differences between us, my ranch, your store, your Eastern background, my preference for solitude, but none of that seems to matter when I'm with you. He took a deep breath. I'm in love with you, Nora Wallace. I probably have been since the day I found you hiding behind that wagon during the bank robbery. Joy flooded through Nora. I love you too, Ethan. I didn't come west looking for love, but I found it anyway in your letters, in your kindness, in the way you see me for who I truly am. Ethan's face transformed with hope and happiness. He cupped her cheek tenderly. May I kiss you, Nora, please, she whispered. This kiss was different from their first, deeper, more certain, full of promise and longing. When they finally parted, both were breathless. I should go, Ethan said reluctantly. Before I forget myself completely, Nora nodded, though part of her wished he would stay. Will I see you tomorrow? Wild horses couldn't keep me away. He kissed her once more, briefly but tenderly, before departing. The next morning, Nora woke to find a letter waiting, but this one had been slipped under her bedroom door, not the store entrance. My dearest Nora, as I write this, I'm sitting on my porch watching the sunrise and thinking of you. Last night was one of the happiest of my life. Saying I love you felt like finally speaking a truth my heart has known for weeks. I ride into town each day just to leave you these letters, just to imagine your smile as you read them. Now I find myself imagining a future where I don't have to leave after delivering them, where your smile greets me each morning and evening. Is that a future you might consider? With all my heart, Ethan. Tears of happiness blurred Nora's vision as she read the note. She dressed quickly and hurried downstairs to find Ethan waiting in the store, looking both hopeful and nervous. "Good morning," she said, smiling through her tears. "Good morning." He stepped closer. "You read my letter, I did?" And Nora reached for him, her decision made. "I would consider that future very carefully, Mr. Xavier. In fact, I believe I might embrace it wholeheartedly." Relief and joy spread across his face. He gathered her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in his enthusiasm. When he set her down, his expression turned more serious. "I should do this properly." To Nora's surprise, Ethan knelt before her, taking her hand in his. "Nora Wallace, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, with all my heart." The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of happiness and planning. They decided on a Christmas wedding, giving them time to make necessary arrangements. The question of where they would live after marriage was resolved when Ethan suggested they maintain both properties, the store in town and the ranch outside it. "I can hire additional help for the ranch," he explained. "And we can spend part of each week in town, part at the ranch." The best of both worlds. November brought the first heavy snowfall, transforming Willow Creek into a winter wonderland. The shutters Ethan had built proved their worth during the first blizzard, protecting the store from howling winds and driving snow. Throughout the storm, Ethan stayed in town, using the opportunity to make further improvements to the store while Nora worked on wedding preparations. As December arrived, excitement grew throughout Willow Creek. The marriage of the Eastern shopkeeper and the reclusive rancher had become the town's favorite topic of conversation. Mrs. Perkins took particular pride in the match, telling anyone who would listen that she had seen it coming from the start. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the world outside sparkling with fresh snow. The small church was decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons for the Christmas season. Nearly everyone in Willow Creek attended, along with ranchers and homesteaders from miles around who had come to know Ethan through his mail deliveries. Nora wore a gown of ivory silk she had ordered from Denver, with a lace veil her mother had worn at her own wedding. As she walked down the aisle alone, her eyes fixed on Ethan waiting at the altar, she knew with absolute certainty that this was where she was meant to be. Ethan watched her approach, love and wonder evident in his expression. When she reached him, he took her hands in his voice steady as he spoke his vows. Nora responded in kind, her heart too full for tears. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Pastor Miller declared. "You may kiss your bride." Their kiss sealed a promise that had begun with secret letters and blossomed into a love neither had expected to find. The celebration afterward at the hotel was joyous, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the entire county. As evening fell, Ethan led Nora away from the festivities and helped her into his waiting sleigh, now decorated with ribbons and bells. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Xavier?" he asked, tucking warm blankets around her. "Home," Nora repeated, savoring the word. "Yes, I'm ready." The sleigh slipped away into the gathering darkness, bells jingling merrily as they headed toward the ranch that would now be their primary home. Snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting down from the vast Wyoming sky. "I have something for you," Ethan said as they traveled, reaching into his coat pocket. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside, Nora found a leather-bound journal. Opening it, she discovered page after page of Ethan's handwriting, all the letters he had written her, copied carefully into a permanent record of their courtship. "Ethan, it's perfect," she whispered, deeply touched by the gift. "I thought you might want to keep them," he said. "And perhaps someday, our children might read them and understand how their parents found each other." "Our children," Nora repeated, the concept both thrilling and overwhelming. Ethan smiled, drawing her closer against the cold. "If we're blessed with them." They continued through the snowy night, the path illuminated by lantern light. Ahead lay their ranch, their home, and all the possibilities of their future together. "I rode into town each day just to leave you those letters," Ethan mused. "Now I get to bring you home instead." "The better ending by far," Nora replied, resting her head on his shoulder as the sleigh carried them toward home. Spring arrived in Wyoming territory with its usual drama-fear storms, followed by days of brilliant sunshine, the land gradually greening as wildflowers began to appear on the hillsides. For Nora and Ethan Xavier, the changing season marked nearly 6 months of marriage, a period of adjustment and deep happiness. They had settled into a routine that accommodated both their needs: 4 days at the ranch, where Ethan tended his growing herd of horses, and 3 days in town, where Nora managed the store with the help of a recently hired assistant. The arrangement worked well, allowing Nora to maintain her independence while building their life together. On a particularly fine April morning, Nora stood on the ranch house porch, watching Ethan work with a spirited young colt in the corral. His patience with the animal was remarkable, firm but gentle, insistent but never harsh. The same qualities, she reflected with a smile, that he brought to their marriage. Their first months together had not been without challenges. Nora had needed to adapt to ranch life: the isolation, the physical demands, the constant awareness of weather and its impact on daily activities. Ethan, in turn, had adjusted to sharing his carefully ordered existence with someone whose Eastern sensibilities sometimes clashed with frontier practicalities. But these adjustments had strengthened, rather than weakened, their bond. Each compromise, each moment of understanding, deepened their connection and confirmed the rightness of their choice. Ethan finished his training session and approached the house, his expression brightening as he spotted Nora waiting. Even now, after months of marriage, the sight of him still quickened her pulse, his tall figure moving with easy grace, his face weathered by sun and wind but handsome in its strength and character. "Successful morning," she called as he reached the porch. "Very." He removed his hat, running a hand through hair now damp with effort. "That colt has potential. Captain Brooks from Fort Laramie is visiting next week to see him and 2 others. The Army contract would be wonderful," Nora agreed. Ethan drew her into his arms for a kiss, heedless of the dust and horse smell clinging to his clothes. When they parted, he studied her face with a slight frown. "You're pale. Are you feeling unwell again?" Nora hesitated. She had been experiencing morning sickness for nearly 2 weeks, but had hesitated to share her suspicions until she was certain. Now, looking at his concerned expression, she decided it was time. "I'm not ill, Ethan, at least not in the way you're thinking." She took his hand, placing it gently against her still flat stomach. "I believe we're going to have a baby." Ethan's expression transformed shock, joy, and a flash of something that might have been fear, all crossing his features in rapid succession. "A baby," he whispered. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor's confirmation. I've missed 2 monthly courses and the morning sickness." She watched him anxiously. "Are you pleased?" For answer, he lifted her off her feet in a gentle embrace, his face buried against her neck. When he set her down, there were tears in his blue eyes. "Please doesn't begin to describe it," he said hoarsely. "Overjoyed, terrified, grateful." He placed a reverent hand on her abdomen again. "A child, our child." His reaction erased any doubts Nora might have harbored about bringing this news to a man who had already lost 1 child. Instead of dwelling in fear, Ethan seemed determined to embrace hope. "We should ride into town tomorrow," he said, practical concerns already asserting themselves. "You should see Dr. Matthews as soon as possible." "I've already arranged to see him when we go to town on Friday," Nora assured him. 3 more days won't make a difference." Ethan nodded, though she could see he would prefer immediate action. "We'll need to prepare the nursery," he continued. "The small bedroom adjacent to ours would be perfect, and you'll need to reduce your hours at the store as your time approaches." "Ethan," Nora laughed, "the baby won't arrive until autumn. We have months to prepare." He smiled sheepishly. "I suppose I'm getting ahead of myself." "It's endearing," she assured him, touching his cheek, "and I love you for it." That evening, they sat together on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the western sky in spectacular colors. Ethan had been quiet since dinner, his thoughts clearly occupied with the day's revelation. "What are you thinking about so intently?" Nora finally asked. He was silent for a moment longer before answering. "About Alice, about how she died so suddenly, 1 day playing in the garden, the next burning with fever, and 3 days later gone." His voice was steady but tinged with old grief. "I wonder sometimes if that's why I came west, not just to escape memories, but to escape the fear of loving that deeply again." Nora squeezed his hand. And now I realize you can't escape that fear by running from love. You can only face it by embracing love despite the fear. He turned to look at her directly. I'm afraid, Nora, afraid of the dangers of childbirth, afraid of all the things that can go wrong in this harsh country, but I refuse to let that fear steal my joy in our child, in our future. That's all any of us can do, Nora said softly. Live fully despite our fears. They sat in companionable silence as stars appeared in the darkening sky, each contemplating the new life growing within Nora, and all it represented: hope, renewal, continuity. Eventually, Ethan spoke again. I'd like to write the baby letters, he said. Like the ones I wrote to you, letters they can read someday to know how much they were wanted, how much they were loved even before they arrived. Tears pricked Nora's eyes at this tender suggestion. I think that's a wonderful idea. I'll start tomorrow, Ethan decided. And I'll keep writing them as our child grows, marking milestones, sharing thoughts too complex for a young mind but important for the person they'll become. Nora leaned against his shoulder, content in this moment of shared anticipation. Our child will have the finest collection of letters in Wyoming territory. Second finest, Ethan corrected with a smile. Your collection will always be the most special. The following months passed in a blur of activity and preparation. Dr. Matthews confirmed Nora's pregnancy and set a likely date in late October for the birth. As summer arrived, bringing intense heat to the Wyoming plains, Nora's condition became increasingly visible. Her body changed daily, it seemed, as their child grew within her. Ethan was attentive to the point of hovering, constantly concerned about her comfort and well-being. He insisted on hiring more help at both the ranch and store, ensuring Nora wouldn't overtax herself. His protective instincts, while occasionally frustrating, were ultimately endearing. True to his word, he began writing letters to their unborn child, thoughtful reflections on parenthood, memories of his own childhood, hopes for their future. Each letter was carefully dated and stored in a wooden box he had crafted specifically for this purpose. On a warm August evening, as they sat together in their favorite spot on the porch, Nora felt the baby move for the first time, a distinctive flutter that made her gasp in surprise and delight. What is it? Ethan asked, immediately alert. The baby, Nora whispered, placing his hand where she had felt the movement. I felt it move. For several minutes they waited, hands joined over the swell of her abdomen, hoping for another sign. Just as Ethan was beginning to look disappointed, there it was again, a definite nudge against their palms. There, Nora exclaimed. Ethan's face reflected wonder and awe. Hello, little one, he said softly to her belly. We're your parents and we're very eager to meet you. As autumn approached, they made final preparations for the baby's arrival. The nursery was ready, painted a cheerful yellow with handcrafted furniture Ethan had made himself. A cradle stood beside their bed for the baby's first months. Tiny garments were washed and folded in anticipation. Nora's time in town decreased as her pregnancy advanced. By October, she was staying primarily at the ranch, making only occasional visits to the store to check on her assistant's management. The coming of their child had shifted her priorities in ways she hadn't anticipated but deeply appreciated. On a crisp October morning, with golden leaves drifting from the aspens and a hint of snow in the air, Nora's labor began. Ethan sent Gil riding hard for town to fetch Dr. Matthews while he stayed at Nora's side, his calm presence belying the anxiety she knew he felt. The labor progressed steadily through the day and into the night. Dr. Matthews arrived by mid-afternoon, offering reassurance that everything was proceeding normally. As darkness fell, Nora's pains intensified. Ethan never left her side, supporting her through each contraction, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement. Just before midnight, their daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to both parents' eyes. Dr. Matthews cleaned and swaddled the infant before placing her in Nora's arms. She's perfect, Nora whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes, marveling at the delicate features and shock of dark hair. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Nora, the other hand gently touching their daughter's cheek. She's beautiful, he agreed, his voice thick with emotion, like her mother. They had already decided on a name if the baby was a girl, Clara, after Nora's mother. Clara Grace Xavier. A new life born from love that had begun with secret letters and blossomed against all expectations. As dawn broke over the Wyoming horizon, Nora dozed with Clara nestled against her. Ethan sat nearby, watching over his family, a sheet of paper on his lap as he composed yet another letter, this one documenting the miracle of his daughter's birth and the overwhelming love he felt for both his girls. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The ranch prospered, Ethan's horses becoming known throughout the territory for their quality and training. The store in town continued to thrive under Nora's occasional guidance and her assistant's capable day-to-day management. Clara grew into a spirited, intelligent child with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined nature. She loved the ranch life, following Ethan around from an early age, developing a natural affinity with horses that delighted her father. When Clara was 3, a brother joined the family, Jacob Ethan Xavier, named for Nora's uncle who had inadvertently brought them together. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life while also benefiting from their mother's commitment to education. Nora established a small school for Clara, Jacob, and several neighboring children, ensuring they received the academic foundation she valued so highly. Through it all, Ethan continued his tradition of letter writing. Each child received regular notes documenting their growth, their achievements, their place in the family narrative. And for Nora, special letters still appeared on anniversaries and birthdays, reminders of the unique way their love had begun. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they returned to the ridge where Ethan had once taken Nora to see the view. The wildflowers were in bloom again, painting the landscape in vibrant colors. Their children raced ahead, eager to explore while their parents followed more sedately, hands linked in comfortable familiarity. "Do you ever miss Boston?" Ethan asked as they reached the summit. The culture, the convenience, the society, Nora considered the question seriously before answering. "Sometimes I miss certain aspects, bookstores, theaters, ease of travel. But do I regret choosing this life instead?" She shook her head decisively. "Not for a moment." Ethan squeezed her hand. 10 years ago, I rode into town just to leave you a letter. I never imagined where that simple act would lead. To the best kind of adventure," Nora replied, leaning against his shoulder as they watched their children gather wildflowers in the distance. "One that continues every day." Together they stood in the golden Wyoming sunshine, surrounded by the beauty of the land they'd both come to love. Blessed by the family, they'd created a family born from loss and hope, from courage and second chances, from a cowboy who rode into town each day just to leave secret letters for a woman who would become the center of his world.